What's up, guys? John Ross here for Ross Racing. So in the last video you saw, we tried breaking in the engine on the B-Mod here, and we had a fuel pump problem, so we only got about 5 of the 20 recommended-ish minutes in of running. Off camera, we put a new fuel pump on it, and last night we completed another 15 minutes of running successfully. No leaks, no weird noises, no issues of any kind that we noticed. But now we're going to go through all our steps and processes of checks just to make sure that that cam survived and that we're good to run this engine on the racetrack. So I'll walk you through what we're going to do here to check and make sure that this thing's healthy. So first things first, we're going to drain the oil out of it and take the oil filter off, and we'll examine the oil and cut the filter apart just to make sure that there's no metal shavings or anything unusual in there. Oil coming out looks great. Absolutely, not sure if you can see that. There's nothing on the drain plug, so that's a really good sign. I mean, there's a little bit of fuzz, like not even fuzz, just like a little bit of residue that you would expect from just from like the rings seating in and stuff, but there's no pieces of anything. Looks fantastic so far. And this is already going way better than the last time I pulled a drain plug out on this channel. Of course, at that time we knew the engine was blown up. One little tip I guess I'll give here. When I'm doing a break-in, rather than running, typically I run a Wix 51061R oil filter when I'm racing. But on the break-in, I like to run the standard 51061, and the reason for that being, the standard filter actually, since it's designed to be run for a longer service interval, it actually has a smaller micron rating. It catches smaller particles than the racing filter does. So for this break-in, when there's going to be a lot of, or at least a little bit of, small metal particles, say from, like from the rings or from the cam establishing its wear pattern, I like to run this standard filter, help catch some of those and keep them from circulating through the engine. So now while we wait for the rest of that oil to drain out of the pan, I'm going to go ahead and cut the filter open so we can take a look at the media and see if it caught anything unusual or unexpected. This little billet oil filter cutting tool is like 40 bucks on Amazon. Definitely recommend it, because if you try to cut this thing open with a hacksaw or angle grinder or whatever other method you go with, you're going to end up introducing metal shavings that didn't come from the engine itself. And if I had a better bench vise, this would work a lot better. There we go. That is one downside about these standard filters versus the racing filters. The case is way thinner, so it tends to like to warp around instead of cutting cleanly. Now let me get my light over here. Yeah, this filter looks great. I'm not seeing any visible chunks of anything, which is a great sign. Now before we go any further, I'm going to go ahead and put oil back in the motor. I'm going to have to turn the engine over to check the valve lash and go ahead and replace these break-in springs with the springs that we're actually going to run. So obviously before I turn it over, I want to make sure it's got oil back in it. Now normally during the racing season, I run AMSOIL Dominator 15W50 from St. Peter's Synthetic Oils. However, for the first race of the year, I want to make sure that the piston rings are fully seated into the bores, and a synthetic oil is actually so slippery that it can stop that from happening properly. That's a recommendation straight from Total Seal Rings, so I try to follow their recommendation on that. So for this first night of racing coming up, we're going to run this Maxima 20W50, which is a mineral oil. And hopefully that helps make sure that everything is fully broken in, fully seated, and then we'll switch over to that full synthetic to get the most possible life that we can out of this engine. So while we're on the subject of oils, I'm curious if there's any racers watching. Leave a comment below on what do you run in your engine. I know there's as many different options seemingly as there is racers. Everybody has their own opinion on it. So that'd be cool to get a discussion going on about that down in the comments. All right, so now we're ready to get on with the next step of inspecting everything and getting the motor ready to run. Got the valve cover off on this side, and we're going to go through, check the lash on all these rockers, and if everything looks good as we go through, we'll replace the break-in valve springs with these brand new ones, and hopefully we won't find anything amiss. Everything looks good under the valve cover so far, nothing's super loose. There was a little condensation, but it's literally been raining. Yeah. But it's literally been raining for like the last 2 days, and also ethanol tends to create a little bit more condensation as it runs versus gasoline, so I'm not too worried about it. So let me walk you through what I've got here. We're going to use the feeler gauge there as we go through and turn the motor over to check the lash. Then we're going to use this valve spring compressor from LSM. It's going to be the first time I've tried this out. My old chintzy one broke, so we're going to use this nice new Ability goodness to compress the valve springs. I'll use this magnetic dealie to keep any valve locks from falling down into the engine as we do that. And also, I don't know if you can see that, but I've plugged the oil returns with little wads of paper towels for now. Obviously, can't forget to take those out before we run the engine again, but that'll keep anything from being able to fall down into the belly of the beast as we do this. We'll use this air compressor hose that adapts to the spark plug openings to pump compressed air into the engine, which will hold the valves closed while I compress the springs with that compressor. And let's get to it. I'm gonna probably just have you watch me here in fast forward mode with some music as I go through and check everything. I should also mention that I'm going to use a remote starter button hooked up to the solenoid to turn the motor over without having to walk back and forth every time. So the way that you check valve lash, if you're not familiar with that, is you want to check the intake side of each cylinder right when the exhaust starts to open. So you turn the engine over until the exhaust valve just starts to open, check your intake valve. Then you turn it over until the intake valve opens all the way and just starts to close, and then you check your exhaust valve. So it's normal during the break-in process to gain, a couple thousandths or so worth of lash. Also, obviously, normally you're supposed to check lash hot, but since I did the initial setting cold, I had to, the engine was just put together. I'm comparing my cold to cold, so I know exactly how much it gained, not taking into account heat expansion and whatnot. And for this cam, the nominal setting is 16 thousandths. We're still right at 16 thousandths on that intake valve. Now let's turn it over. And we maybe gained a couple thousandths on the exhaust, but that's normal. So everything's good on this cylinder. We're gonna go ahead and pop these guys off, change the valve springs, and then we'll move on to the rest of the engine. Just keep going through and doing that.
So we're down to the last set of valves here, and notice a little bit of an anomaly. As you can see on that exhaust valve, the witness mark from the roller on top of the valve is only on that one side, compared to the one next to it where it's got a nice even mark all the way across. So that means that rocker was riding a little bit off center. Now, as you can see, we are running guide plates, and I attempted as best as I could to set those up to center the rockers before we started the engine. But it looks like that one isn't riding quite where it's supposed to. So I'm going to go ahead and adjust that guide plate and try to get it to center up a little bit better. That's going to be the first thing that I try. I think I'm going to maybe spring for some nicer guide plates that are either adjustable or maybe the ones that have like a kick up to them where they hold the push rod up a little higher to try to get a little bit better control side to side. The other thing, I don't know if it could be, with these full roller rocker arms, they don't have any ability to rock side to side like a ball pivot stock style one like I'm used to running. I don't know if it could be a machining error where maybe this stud and this valve aren't perfectly in line. I guess we'll find out. Well, there you have it, folks. It looks like the cam survived the break-in there with flying colors. The only potential issue that we found, was actually on the rocker arm side rather than on the cam and lifter side. So with that in mind, after kind of going through and looking at everything, I think I'm going to go ahead and try to source some better guide plates for this engine to try to hold the rockers more perfectly centered over the valve before we take it out and race it. If I can't get them before the first race, then I guess we'll chance it. But like if you go back and watch the video about B-Mod valve train components, it's kind of the most critical part of these motors in a lot of ways because it's the only area where we really have a lot of freedom. And now that they've opened it up and allowed us to run these full roller rockers, this is my first experience running them. So I want to make sure, knowing that there's kind of one less degree of freedom with them, that I have everything perfectly in order and as good as we can have it for the first race. If I was to break a valve because the geometry was wrong and
drop a valve into the motor and blow it up like I did, that other motor last year, especially this early in the year, that'd be pretty catastrophic for my season. I don't have a backup motor on the shelf, and I don't have the money to buy one. So we're going to do everything that we can to help this one survive. That's about all that I have right now for engine stuff to do. Next thing I'm going to do is slam the transmission into this car, and then help Patrick out with his car a little bit. And also we got body work to do. So I'll probably have a video showing some of that stuff later. But other than that, you can look forward to seeing us out at the track here in about a week or so.